I was talking about going camping with a bunch of my coworkers. Like, not camping with my coworkers. I was talking about camping with my coworkers.
Yes, I follow.
There are pieces of me that miss doing as much camping as I did when I was a kid, and there are pieces of me that are like, well, I'm very happy with having like a bed to sleep in and not having bugs and dirt over everything.
I'm taking a break from camping this year. We've gone camping every year the last couple of years, and we've just faced some terrible weather that has made it hard to keep my spirits up. We were in Virginia and it was like 100 degrees. And we were in Maine and it was raining. And it's great when the weather is nice. But I think the problem for me is it feels so high stakes because it's like I've taken the time off. We've driven all the way to whatever the location is. So if it's the weather's not good, then you're just fucked, you know?
Yeah. I do think I have had a couple of the greatest meals of my life out camping. One of which was when I think it was the canoe trip.
Was that the one with the steaks?
That was the stakes over the fire.
Yes.
It was a 9-mile canoe trip down the river. And we got into camp and someone had driven ahead and like met us there and had started like making steaks over the fire.
Oh, that's sweet.
It was so good.
I love that.
Yeah, one of the like adult leaders of the group had driven ahead and started making dinner. And then like the first group of us that got in started helping and like doing other prep stuff, and it was so good.
Have I told you about how my mother-in-law doesn't believe that it's possible to cook over fire?
No.
Because I'm a very ambitious camp cook. As listeners of the show know, we both love to cook. And so when I go camping, I'll bake bread or I'll make tacos with tortillas from scratch and cook the tortillas over the fire or something. You know, just be adventurous, be bold, because it's fun. Why not? This is how humans have cooked food forever, and we all still do. But Miles was telling their mom about it, and she was just utterly baffled that it was possible to make things over a campfire. And I was like, what? How do you think we've made food literally forever? Your gas stove is fire. I know there's not a knob on a campfire to adjust, but it's not that hard to figure out. This is still how lots of people cook their food. Like, what? It was just very difficult to explain. Cook food on fire like caveman. We can do it.
Right. And if you need to adjust like the heat, like you move it either to like different points of like high heat coals versus like stuff that's been pulled away from the fire for a little while. Like there are ways to do this in a very gourmet fashion if you wanted to. And there's ways to do this where it's like, I'm roasting this thing. I'm boiling water. It's good.
It's burned and raw at the same time.
Yeah. But I feel like to make a really good camp meal, the key is going for like a really long hike. And then getting into camp and like preferably carrying all of your shit on your back, because hunger is the best sauce.
So true.
You know, if you just show up at the campground, it's not going to be as good.
My secret to camp cooking is my same secret to travel cooking in general, which is anything that requires measured ingredients, I'll just pre-measure it first. So I'll have a little Ziploc baggie with all of the spices mixed together in the amounts that I need, or all of the flour or whatever. So then I don't have to be scooping things out of containers at the campsite. Also works very well for Airbnbs and other things, because then you can just roll up and start cooking.
Amazing.
And it's less work because you've already done half the prep.
Well, we might not be making herbs and stewed rabbit, but there are other integral parts of the journey that we can get to. Hello, everyone. and welcome back to another episode of The Fandom Apprentice. We are today discussing poetry and songs in Lord of the Rings. I'm Ryn, I'm one of your hosts. I grew up with Lord of the Rings. My father, I think, read me The Hobbit when I was 5. And I grew up alongside Bilbo and Frodo's journeys, and it had a profound effect on me and my love of fantasy and my love of story. And for the last 5 years or so, I've been sharing that love with my very good friend, Sam.
Hello, I'm Sam. I'm the other one. I have now fully consumed The Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings books, the movies, the extended editions, obviously. Not the newer Hobbit films, but, the original trilogy. So in this sort of interlude between finishing all those big pieces of media and the things that will come next that we'll talk about a little bit later, we are going to take some time to just do a bit of a roundup, a little mini analysis of some of the poems and songs, because they're so essential to the experience of these books and movies, and they deserve their own moment in the spotlight.
Yeah. As Sam said, we will have an announcement at the end of this episode. So stay tuned and you will be able to hear about our future. But to launch into poetry, we called out the poems and the songs as we were reading quite frequently because, like Sam said, they're so essential to the reading of these books. They're so useful for establishing the setting and establishing that sense of place and that sense of character that you get from all of these. They make the world feel so much more rich.
Mm-hmm.
The books would certainly not be the same without these. And so it felt like worthwhile to do our little roundup. And we talked a little bit about doing our top 10 lists, which we'll get to shortly. But I did remember one of the things we'd called out in books 4 and 5, really. And at the end of Two Towers, we'd called out that there wasn't a lot of poems or songs in that section.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so I looked up how many poems and songs are in each section of Lord of the Rings. In book 1, so the first half of Fellowship, there are 22 poems or songs.
Oh, damn.
That is the most in any section.
Mm-hmm.
There are 10 poems or songs in book 2 in the second half of Fellowship. The first half of the Two Towers, book 3, there are 14. A bunch of them are fairly short, but there are still 14 of them. Book 4, there are 2.
Oh.
One of which is that 4 or 5 line bit about elephants.
Mm-hmm.
Book 5, there are 6. And book 6, there are 7. There are also a solid number of poems in The Hobbit on its own. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13 total poems or songs in The Hobbit, some of which are rewrites of earlier pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we called out the context of a lot of these when we were reading about them. So do we want to just run down our top 10 lists? Yeah, do you want to go first?
Sure. Mine are not in any particular order. I don't know that I could necessarily pick favorites. Do we want to just do quick, just list the titles, or talk about them a little bit?
I think we can talk about them a little bit if we want.
Okay, sure. So my first one was Roads, which is just highly sentimental. The version from the animated 1977 Hobbit movie is delightful. That, I think, is the version that lives in my head the most firmly.
Roads go ever, ever on, over rock and under tree, by caves where never sun has shone, by streams that never find the sea.
And that one also sparked an honorable mention for another song from the animated movie that's not in the books, but The Greatest Adventure is delightful.
The greatest adventure is what lies ahead. Today and tomorrow are yet to be said. The chances, the changes are all yours to make. The mold of your life is in your hands to break.
And we did kind of laugh about it when we were watching it as a group, because they keep returning to motifs from that song every 30 seconds in the movie, to the point where it's a little bit much, but it is deeply charming. So Rhodes and The Greatest Adventure are kind of linked in my mind because they're very similar thematically. Number 2, The Man in the Moon, another very, very sentimental one. I have a vivid memory of, I mean, you've recited this poem many times, but specifically way before we started this project, before I had read any of the books, walking with you to get bagels from your old apartment, and you just start showing off and reciting the whole poem, and it was just so delightful and really fun. And that every time I think about that poem, I just remember a nice spring or summer day and just walking with you to get bagels. So that's nice. It's obviously has nothing to do with the context in the book, but it makes me happy when I think about it. That one also is not in the movies, but it is in the musical.
There's an inn of old renown where they brew a beer so brown. The moon came rolling down the hill one heaven's day night to drink his fill.
On a 3-string fiddle there played the ostler's cat so fair. The horned cow that night was seen to dance a jig upon the green.
Or a version of it, which is really fun. I like it. I had heard it before I had seen the movies, and I thought that it was from the movies originally, but it's not.
No.
But that's a fun one. Then number 3, Misty Mountains. It's hard to pick a favorite overall, but that one's definitely up there because it's just so good. Ambiance, vibey. I have sung it on top of Misty Mountains, and nobody appreciated it, but it was fun.
That's just sad.
The uncultured swine hiking with me, that being my spouse and my brother, who didn't think it was very funny.
That's a point. That's the first point against your brother I think I've ever heard.
A lot of these are from The Hobbit, actually, but the Hobbit is great. Chip the glasses and crack the plates, another super fun one.
That's what Bilbo Baggins hates.
Chip the glasses, crack the plates. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates. So carefully with the plates.
I was watching the version of it from the animated Hobbit movie and thinking, damn, this really sounds like something that Santa's elves should be singing. And then I realized that it's because it's Rankin Bass, so it has the same vibe as all the old-timey Christmas movies. Number 5, Song of the Ent and Entwife. Also not in the movies, but I love some Ent nuance. I think it's a good insight into what the Ents value and experience and the things that they've lost. It's a nice moment. This one, I don't know if it officially has a title. Number 6, the Lord of the Rings wiki calls it Rahum Ra. That's the with roll of drum we come, we come. That's the one that I recite to myself the most often. That it just gets me hype. It's fun. I like it. That one might be my favorite, actually.
Though Isengard be ringed and barred with doors of stone.
I could probably pull it up and recite it myself. It's in one of my many tabs, but it just rolls off the tongue.
I feel like this is a good time because it's also on my list for obvious reasons because it's so good. It's one of those, to Isengard, we go to war. I'll get into this a little more when I go through mine. There are recordings out there of Tolkien reading some of these.
Oh, I should have listened to those.
And some of them are, it feels almost like he's just kind of like trying to get through it.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them he's really bringing the emotion. And I feel like this one in particular, he really brings the emotion to it.
To Isengard, be ringed and barred with doors of stone. To Isengard, be strong and hard and cold as stone and bare as bone. We go to war, to hew the stone and break the door. For bowl and bow are burning now, the furnace roars, we go to war. To land of gloom, with tramp of doom, with roll of drum, we come. To Isengard, with doom we come, with doom we come, with doom we come.
Oh yeah, he's bringing it. He's feeling it. I love it. Yeah, that is utterly delightful.
It's so cute.
Next one, number 7, Lament for the Rohirrim, the Where's the Horse and the Rider. I just really liked how that one captures the mood very differently, as we've talked about in the books and in the movie, but both times I think to very good effect. Number 8, I Sit Beside the Fire and Think, which I think also not in the movies, ?
No.
That one I was very emotional about when we read it, because we were kind of returning to Bilbo after having finished The Hobbit, getting perspective on him, on his life, kind of getting ready to embrace Frodo as our new protagonist, and Bilbo kind of hanging up his walking stick. There's a lot of feelings in that one, confronting his mortality. It was a nice bow to put on to sort of recognize the experience that the readers have probably had with Bilbo before picking up Fellowship, and sort of gently shepherding us through that transition. That was nice. Last two, number 9, The World Was Young, the Mountains Green, which is the poem that Gimli recites when they get to Moria, and Sam makes the mistake of referring to some of the caverns as holes, and then Gimli goes, "These aren't fucking holes, you uncultured imbecile." And the poem itself is fine. It's a good poem. It's not my favorite on its own. It is not like the most remarkable, but I do like it for what it represents in terms of dwarf lore and being a really good Gimli moment, a bonding moment for Sam and Gimli because Sam loves it and wants to learn it. And I went all the way back in my show notes document to see if I had initially had anything to say when I came across this poem way back in the beginning of Two Towers. And I didn't really have any notes on it then either. I just wrote, Gimli sings a song, whatever. I was focusing on more important things. But I did, just like going back that far in our notes and looking at some of my earliest impressions of Two Towers, gave me what I assume is similar to the feeling that parents of toddlers have when they're like, I think I want to have another kid. I'm like, damn, I want to do this again. I want to just go back. I want to reread all the books. I want to make another podcast. I want to have this whole experience from the beginning. I want to read it for the first time again. Because, I mean, we've done so much reflecting on the overall experience. I don't want to belabor that point too much. But it was really fun just to go back and see how far we've come with the books. That was nice. And then my number 10, Song of Boromir, because I had to represent me coming full circle on Boromir. It's growth. I guess he's fine. But that is the speed run of my top 10, and I think we'll probably have more to say once I hear your top 10, and then we can kind of bounce off each other.
I gotta say my favorite's Rhodes. Like, again, my top 10 are in no particular order, but I do think the top 1 is Rhodes in all of its many verses and all of its many uses and all of the many places it shows up in the books, from the end of The Hobbit to multiple points in the journey of Lord of the Rings, sung by Bilbo and sung by Frodo. That's my number 1.
Yeah, that's kind of carries us through the entire story. It's always like a place that we return to.
Yeah, definitely. And then The Man in the Moon Stayed Up Too Late, which is, of course, the song from Bree, which I, as you said, have recited many times, including at one point to my old roommate and one of our D&D group while standing on our coffee table, like starting sitting down next to her and ending standing on the coffee table. And then various others, some of them are because of the adaptations. Some of them are, I think, because of, I don't know, where they are in the books. I think, the Ents marching song is in there. So that's a third. Cold be hand and heart and bone. The white, the chant of the whites. And a piece of that is because you haven't heard the chant of the whites until you have heard it recited by Sir Christopher Lee.
Cold be hand and heart and bone, and cold be sleep under stone, never more to wake on stony bed, never till the sun fails and the moon is dead.
The Lament for Gandalf, I think, is in there. Misty Mountains. Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day, to seek our pale enchanted gold. That, I mean, again, I said, I have mentioned that I first read The Hobbit with my dad at like age 5, probably, like in that age range. And that is right within the first chapter.
Yeah.
It is such a like mind grabbing, like attention grabbing poem. That's what starts you. That's what starts Bilbo on his journey. That's what starts you on your journey. That is what started me on this journey.
Yeah. I love that.
The Bilbo Baggins Chip the Glasses, Crack the Plates is the only song before that in the entire series. And that's nice. But not quite the same.
Yeah, that one's a little bit silly. A lot silly. But Misty Mountains has gravitas. It's intense.
Yeah. So I think that's 5. Right? Roads, Cold, Man in the Moon, Misty Mountains, Lament for Gandalf. Galadriel's Messages. Where now are the Dunedain? Elisar, Elisar, why do thy kinsfolk wander afar? Near is the hour when the lost should come forth, and the grey company ride from the north. But dark is the path appointed for thee. The dead watch the road that leads to the sea. And then that leading into the warning about Legolas and the sea. Legolas, Greenleaf long under tree, in joy thou hast lived. Beware of the sea. If thou hearest the cry of the gull on the shore, thy heart shall then rest in the forest no more. And then the wrap up to Gimli of just, Lochbearer, wherever thou goest, my thought goes with thee. But have a care to lay thine axe to the right tree. Don't cut down an ent or a huarn. It will not end well.
Yeah. Good advice.
All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken. From the shadows a light shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken. The crownless again shall be king. The Ents marching song. I sit beside the fire and think. The Lament for the Rohirrim. And probably 15 birds and 5 fir trees.
15 birds in 5 fir trees, their feathers were fanned in a fiery breeze. But funny little birds, they had no wings. Oh, what shall we do with the funny little things? Oh, what shall we do with the funny little things?
I considered that one. I considered putting that one on my list. It is very fun.
I have other ones. I have a list of 13, and I didn't mention some of them. And added 1 or 2 that weren't on the list originally. It's hard to pick just 10 of these because they're all so evocative for where they are in the books. And there are, poems that you can kind of skip over. There are poems entirely in Elvish that don't get translated, that the prayer to Elbereth early on doesn't get translated for the reader.
Mm-hmm.
But it serves its purpose to create a sense of place.
Yeah.
To create a setting, to introduce you to the elves.
I feel like you can really see the difference in our lists between me being a first-time reader and you returning to the books, because I feel like more of mine are the ones that, not necessarily more memorable, but more prominent, I guess. That's like, if you Google list of poems, these are going to be on there.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like you have a lot more subtle character building, ones that perfectly suit a certain moment just because of being more attuned to them. And I think that that's really cool. Obviously, they're all amazing, but I think that it's illustrates the things that stuck out to us very well. Whereas I'm just like trying to keep up with the plot and noticing things for the first time. Like, okay, like these are the big poems that Tolkien is really shoving in your face. But then there's also, the more you pay attention to characters who are just speaking in poetry, like Gladriel sending her messages, or poems that aren't translated, there's more layers, and it rewards returning to it and doing more investigation.
And I feel like, too, for me, some of the ones that have stuck in my head are the shorter poems, the couple of lines here and there, because I can remember the whole thing. Like, I don't have to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the longer ones that I do remember are either because I've read them so many times or because of adaptations. You mentioned the 1977 Hobbit movie by Rankin and Bass, which we've mentioned on the podcast, but we haven't had an explicit episode on. That also was one of my first experiences of a book transferred to screen, and they do such a good job with it, with just 106 minutes of film.
Yeah.
For this, children's book that does move quickly but is still dense, they do an excellent job with it.
Mm-hmm.
And they use so many of Tolkien's poems as the soundtrack, adapted by Maury Laws and Glenn Yarborough. And like you said, The Greatest Adventure is the only piece of music on that soundtrack with original lyrics. So they have embellished some of the others or rearranged some of the lines to make it flow better, but everything else comes from Tolkien's writing, which I loved.
Yeah.
I had a book as a kid called Poetry Speaks to Children, which was a collection of poems from various poets, from Shakespeare to Langston Hughes and beyond. And it had a CD along with it, with a lot of the poets reading their work, including Tolkien reading The Man in the Moon Stayed Up Too Late.
Oh, no way. That's awesome.
And so that remains one of my favorite recordings of him, and is him reading that poem. And he's just, it's another one of those moments where he's clearly having a good time with it.
Yeah.
There is an inn, a merry old inn, beneath an old grey hill, and there they brew a beer so brown that the man in the moon himself came down one night to drink his fill. The ostler has a tipsy cat that plays a five-stringed fiddle, and up and down he runs his bow, now squeaking high, now purring low, now sawing in the middle. The landlord keeps a little dog that's mighty fond of jokes. When there's good cheer among the guests, he cocks an ear at all the jests and laughs until he chokes. They also keep a horned cow as proud as any queen, but music turns her head like ale and makes her wave her tufted tail and dance upon the green.
I think we might have included clips of this in a previous episode. I feel like I've heard this before.
I mean, I've definitely shown it to you. The other one, honestly, that I can't remember whether it was in Poetry Speaks to Children or whether it was in something else, is I know I heard a musical adaptation of this as a kid, and I have not for the life of me been able to find it. And like the only thing that I can really identify from it is the piece about the ostler having a tipsy cat that plays a five-string fiddle, and up and down he runs his bow, now squeaking high, now purring low, now sawing in the middle. And that sits in my brain, and I have not been able to find the full thing since. And it is probably some random CD from somewhere that was in my parents' library, but no longer exists since they got rid of all of it when they moved.
This makes me want to log into Reddit for the first time since 2017 and go on the Lost Media subreddit and see if anyone could find it. That's a mystery that I feel like the internet could solve.
Probably. If any listener of this podcast knows what I'm talking about, please send that to us. You will have my undying gratitude. A couple of things that I was noticing about the poetry as I was going through all of them for my research. Now, I have to preface this with a disclaimer of I know jack fuck about poetry.
Oh, same. I know it has never come easily to me. I know fucking nothing about poems. My spouse, who's on the other side of this wall, overhearing my half of this conversation, is probably just scrabbling at the door wanting to talk about poetry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I didn't take a single college English class. Not one.
Me either.
I got my writing requirements out of the way through a biology course, interestingly enough, and an anthropology course and a gender studies class.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need to take an English class, and I didn't. So I know jack fuck about poetry. Everything I know about poetry comes from osmosis, reading these and talking about poems and stories in the Poetic Edda from my Nordic mythology class. That's it. Or Latin, when we talked about the Aeneid and shit. That stuff I know vaguely about. But a couple of things I was noticing that Rohirric poetry doesn't really go in for rhyme. It tends to be alliterative more than it's rhyming.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of pieces of Rohirric poetry we have out of doubt, out of dark to the day's rising. He rode singing in the sun, sword unsheathing. Hope he rekindled and in hope he ended. Over death, over dread, over doom lifted. Out of loss, out of life, unto long glory. So you have that doubt, dark day, singing sun, sword, death, dread, doom, loss, life, long.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have another piece of Rohirric poetry. You have from dark Dunharrow in the dim morning. With Thane and Captain rode Thengil's son. To Edoras he came, the ancient halls of the Mark. Wardens mist enshrouded, golden timbers were in gloom mantled. It's the alliterative bits again.
Yeah.
We see more rhyme in Hobbit poems. Upon the hearth the fire is red, beneath the roof there is a bed, but yet not yet weary are our feet. Still round the corner we may meet a sudden tree or standing stone that none have seen but we alone. Tree and flower, leaf and grass, let them pass, let them pass. Hill and water under sky, pass them by, pass them by. And it's a lot of rhyming, a lot of either A-B or rhyming couplets, occasionally rhyming triplets. Still round the corner there may wait a new road or secret gate. A lot of couplets. It feels lowbrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The elves also have rhyming, but it feels more highbrow often. Where now are the Dunedain, Elisar, Elisar? Why do thy kinsfolk wander afar? Near is the hour when the lost should come forth and the grey company ride from the north. Mysterious. Highbrow.
Yeah, they're more formal just in general.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But then you have Bilbo imitating elven poetry with in western lands beneath the sun, the flowers may rise in spring, the trees may bud, the waters run, the merry finches sing. Or there may be 'tis cloudless night, and swaying beeches bear the elven stars as jewels white amid their branching hair.
I had never noticed until you pointed it out that, yeah, obviously he has influences from elven poetry, but when you contrast it against other Hobbit poems, the difference is so clear. That's really interesting.
Another piece. And then we do see rhetoric poetry that does rhyme.
Mhm.
You know, the where now is the horse and the rider, where is the horn that was blowing, where is the helm and the hauberk and the bright hair flowing, where is the hand on the harp string and the red fire glowing, where is the spring and the harvest and the tall corn growing. So there's rhyming there, but there is still the alliteration, the helm and the hauberk, the horse and the horn, the hand on the harp string.
Mhm.
And then the entish stuff feels rhythmic. It feels like a drum itself.
Yeah.
We come with roll of drum, ta runda 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 rum.
There's a lot of like rumbly onomatopoeia in the end poems. Lots of like big epic nature forces of nature kind of energy. How does Tom Bombadil fit into this picture?
Tom Bombadil is fucking chaos. He's chaos incarnate. I didn't honestly look at a bunch of his things because it's not my favorite. It's fun. But it's a lot of rhyming, but it's a lot of like nonsense rhymes.
Yeah.
And that calls back to who Tom Bombadil is. He's calling to Vanamoinen from the Kalevala, where he's reshaping his environment through song. And Vanamoinen does that in the Kalevala.
Mhm.
But, you know, his rhyme schemes are, you know, hey doll, merry doll, ring a dong dillo, ring a dong hop along, fat ball the willow, Tom bomb, jolly Tom Bombadillo, which honestly, I feel like he was Tom Bombadil the day they met him. Like reading this, he could have been something else entirely if his rhymes were something else another day.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I mentioned Tolkien reading his own poetry. Mentioned the 1977 Hobbit. Mentioned we've had Christopher Lee reading. Christopher Lee cooperated with a group called the Tolkien Ensemble, which has put all of the poems and songs to music.
Oh shit!
You can find all of their stuff on Spotify. It's very fun. I like it a lot. I am still attached to the stuff from the 1977 Hobbit because that was my first. You never forget your first. And so I'm very attached to that vibe. There is also another artist who put a lot of these pieces to music, Donald Swann. And Donald Swann has one piece. Actually, it's the only piece of song that Tolkien actually composed himself. Was and I don't have a good recording of this to send you. If I find one, we'll insert it into the podcast. But it is Galadriel's lament, Galadriel's farewell, Namarie.
Lauriel antalassi surinen, ieni unotte me vera maraldaron, ieni velinte iulder avanier, mio romar delisse miro vorreva.
Which is sung in Quenya. And apparently when Donald Swann was collaborating with Tolkien on this, he sang his thoughts to Tolkien, and Tolkien went, actually, no, this is what I was thinking, and sang it back and sang his thoughts to him. And it's Gregorian chant like.
Ooh,
and
that's cool.
Donald Swann transcribed what Tolkien was singing, and that is the final piece that he wrote.
I love that.
That's the song that translates, like gold fall the leaves in the wind, long years numberless as the wings of trees. Ai lorie lantar lassi sorinen, yeni unotime ve ramar aldaran. You know, it's a very long poem. I'm not going to read the entire thing in Elvish.
I respect that.
I might get a little flack for this, but the adaptations I don't particularly like is Rob Inglis and Andy Serkis in the audiobooks.
Spicy. I have not listened to the audiobooks, so I do not have a frame of reference.
Rob Inglis is okay for some of them. I don't particularly like Andy Serkis's interpretations of a lot of them. Because they're both doing the thing where they are trying to read the audiobook and so not insert too much of their own creation, while also being like, yes, this is a song. And so it's like sort of chanted, sort of sung, but kind of tonelessly for a lot of these pieces.
Yeah, I feel like songs in audiobooks in general are very hit or miss.
Yeah. But there are, and then you mentioned too also that there's some adaptations of some of these poems in the Lord of the Rings movies that we have just discussed quite extensively over the last couple of episodes. If you would like to hear our coverage of that, you can go back. We do discuss the Lament of the Rohirrim in our Two Towers episode, and Billy Boyd's version of part of, I believe it's one of the walking songs.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, which is so happy in the book and then is so sad there. And then Bernard Hill's incredible delivery of Theoden's speeches and the Lament for the Rohirrim, just bringing the emotion. And then the one point I have to give to Peter Jackson and Howard Shore again with the Hobbit movies. I don't love the Peter Jackson Hobbit movies. They have their merits. They have their rather significant drawbacks, but they do have their merits. One of which is their adaptation of Misty Mountains, which I am sure everybody listening to this podcast has heard.
Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day to find our long forgotten gold.
It's really good.
It's
I like
really
it a lot.
good. And I remember sending you, before we started this podcast, before we started reading through any of these books one winter, it's one of like the TikTok like deep bass supergroups that did a version of it.
Yes.
And
yes.
it must have been like January or February. So I remember standing out in the porch, or on the porch in the snow, freezing my tits off, listening to it through headphones with my eyes closed, because that was the only way I could get the ambiance I wanted. And then sending it to you and being like, here, before you listen to this, do these things. I know you're going to be cold. Don't worry about it.
I remember this, yes.
And while I do absolutely love the adaptation in the 1977 Hobbit, and I'm obviously quite attached to that,
Far o'er the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day to seek the pale enchanted gold.
I think the Peter Jackson Hobbit films just knocked it out of the park with that one.
After this, I'm probably just going to go listen to it again.
And now that I think about it, it has that callback to the Fellowship theme.
Oh, yeah, doesn't it?
Ba-da-dun, da-da-dun, da-da-dun.
Goddamn. It's all connected.
Like, again, knocked it out of the fucking park on that one.
Yeah, that rules.
But the fact that we have spent so long now talking about just the adaptations and the various adaptations of these poems, it shows you how integral these are to the experience of Lord of the Rings. Tolkien, there have been criticisms of Tolkien's poetry as being like not very technically skilled. And I would argue, sure, maybe it's not, Robert Frost, maybe it's not Langston Hughes, it's not Shakespeare. But one, it takes a lot of skill to do multiple different styles of poetry, like defined styles that match each of your little internally constructed cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes skill to do something poorly. And so...
True. We talked about this with the Father Christmas letters.
Yeah. When Sam is composing his little poems about like the stone troll, or when he's talking about the Oliphants, or his verse in the Lament for Gandalf, it's clearly more amateur than Bilbo's poetry.
Yeah.
It's not unskilled, but it is clearly more at an amateur level. And it takes skill. It takes a lot of skill to be able to clearly separate those to your reader.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I have anything else. I don't have anything else in my written notes, but I do have 90 billion tabs open, which shouldn't be surprising to anybody who has listened to this podcast for more than one episode. But as I sit beside my computer and think of all the tabs I have open, do you have anything else? Do you have anything else to talk about for Tolkien's poetry and the various adaptations?
No, I don't think so. This is an area that I'm not super knowledgeable about. I definitely know more about Tolkien than I do about poetry. But it's nice to go out of my comfort zone a little bit and spend time examining these on their own. It was a good exercise.
The one other piece, actually, I did want to talk about is Tolkien's non-Lord of the Rings poetry, because he was a poet. Like, he did write other pieces of poetry.
Mm-hmm.
There are other poems. The Adventures of Tom Bombadil has a longer cycle. And then the other one that I'm really familiar with is his Legend of Sigurd and Gudrun, which is a retelling of parts of the saga of the Volsungs. And he rewrote it as a piece of epic poetry. Alone dwelt Sigmund, his land ruling. Cold was his bower, queenless, childless. In songs he heard of sweetest maiden, of Sigurd's beauty, Svafnir's daughter. Old was Sigmund as an oak gnarled, his beard was grey as bark of ash. Young was Sigurdin, and yellow gleaming, her locks hung long on Lysam's shoulder. In that, he's much more obviously drawing on his education, his academic skill, and his academic areas of interest in Old Norse and Anglo-Saxon writings. But if you take that and you compare it to the poetry that we read in Lord of the Rings, you can see the direct through lines. The Lament for the Rohirrim we called out in the episode where we discussed that as a rewrite of an Old English poem.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think I'm very glad that he put these in. I think they are, as we said, just essential to the reading of the stories. And I think to connect this more to the overall thoughts of this podcast, they're essential to how I feel about fantasy. I don't feel like it's a fantasy world, like it's an in-depth fantasy world, unless you have what is clearly some form of oral tradition story being passed along and sung in taverns and things.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. And I'm now thinking about other fantasy stories that I've read where the little rhymes and asides and bits of the broader culture that come in through poetry and song are really some of the parts that stick with me the most, even if I don't realize that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, once you point it out, then you can't unsee it.
Yeah. So it's an essential part of media. And I guess as we wrap up the rather less than 35,000 hours of discussion on Tolkien. Do we want to make our grand announcement now? I feel like this is a good time to make our grand announcement.
I would love to make our grand announcement.
So as we've mentioned for the last few episodes, we have wrapped up our main discussion of Tolkien, and don't worry if you have come here for the Tolkien. It will remain, one, it will remain in our feed, and two, it will remain a part of our interpretations for a long time. We'll have various bonus episodes on Tolkien content. I'm sure we'll come back to the world of Tolkien at a later point, whether it's for one episode or for a longer series of episodes. But it is time for us to move on to another set of stories that, in the grand tradition of this podcast, I introduced to Sam. I did not grow up with these stories, but they are very important to me, and then I did make other people read them. I started with your spouse, but then when that didn't quite take, I got onto your case. We are going to be discussing, and this is a good time now to say this, we're going to be discussing The Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells.
I am so excited. We've talked about Murderbot so much on this show. Every person that we know in real life has probably heard us recommend Murderbot. It has been universally loved by anyone who I've harassed long enough that just to shut me up, they've started reading it. They have come back and said, thank you, this has been amazing. And we have been obsessed with it. I think, I'm not sure when it got optioned for TV rights, but definitely since before the TV show was a definite thing that was happening.
Yeah.
We've been obsessed with Murderbot, and we have been talking about wanting to do a mini season on Murderbot. So lucky for us, it is also extremely timely, because if the timing of the release of this episode works out, folks who maybe are just starting to get into Murderbot because of the show and are looking for more in-depth discussions of the plot and of the books can come here and hang out with us, because I am so absolutely delighted that there will be an influx of new Murderbot fans in the world.
Yeah, so if you are listening to this podcast right when it comes out, you will be mid first season of the Apple TV Plus show Murderbot. We're going to start with the books because that is how we got into them. We are going to discuss the show at some point. We might not do like an episode by episode breakdown, but we will discuss the show. But we're going to start with the books because that is where our love for Murderbot grew. So I don't know whether we'll release the first one next week or within the next few episodes. You will be able to hear us discussing everyone's favorite rogue sec unit, rogue killer construct,
who just wants to watch space Netflix. Leave it alone.
So desperately, just leave it to watch Space Grey's Anatomy, please, for the love of God.
Yeah. I am not a person who rereads books in general. It's just not something that is fun for me. But I have read the entire Murderbot series probably at least 3 times at this point. Some of the individual books I may have read more than that. And I was just starting my annual reread of the series that last week or earlier this week, and then went, oh shit, no, we're talking about it for the podcast. I should wait so that I'm not reading the same book back to back over and over. But I never get tired of Murderbot. It is delightful. It has queerness that is not just implied, it's actually there. So that's great. Not that it isn't actually there in Lord of the Rings, as I think it's established, but there is some juicy queer space non-monogamy stuff that would make Murderbot physically ill if it had to look at it for more than half a second.
Thanks, third mom.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Ugh, I'm very excited to discuss Murderbot. We'll be starting with All Systems Red. I don't know whether we'll do 1 episode on All Systems Red or 2 episodes on All Systems Red. We haven't fully figured out the format, or I haven't fully figured out the format because that is my job for the show.
Which I appreciate so much. I appreciate many things about you, and that is one of them.
So I will figure out the exactness of the format, but very soon, whether it is next episode or the episode after or the episode after that, depending, within the next few episodes, you will be able to hear us discuss Murderbot by Martha Wells. So it's a good time to read them. They're quick reads. If you want to read along with the podcast, you absolutely can.
The audiobooks are amazing. If you were a fan of Welcome to Night Vale back in the day, Kevin R. Free, who did Kevin from Desert Bluffs, does the audiobooks, and he does an amazing job.
He's fantastic. We'll get more into that, and I look forward to taking our universal rules of fantasy and adapting them to become universal rules of science fiction.
Yes.
Gotta keep it on the standard podcast level.
Oh, yes.
But thank you so much for coming along on the many stages of this first journey that we've been on. The greatest adventure is what lies ahead.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So if you want to listen to us talk about more Tolkien things, Murderbot, whatever comes after Murderbot, you can follow our podcast on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. You can leave us a 5-star review or a written review to get us in front of other people's ears. You can follow our social media. We are at FanAppPod on whatever social media platforms we're on. I don't do too much with social media these days because I've been taking a personal break, but you can, if we're on a social media site, we are on there as at FANAPPPOD, and you can always get in touch with us at thefandomapprentice@gmail.com. Anything else, Sammy?
No, I think that's it. I am excited for our next adventure with Murderbot. Thanks again, everyone, for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
The Phantom Apprentice is produced and edited by Ryn and Sam. Our music is written and performed by James. You can hear more of his music on Spotify or on Bandcamp under the group Baeruz, Baeruz. Our art is by Casey Turgeon. You can find more of her work at KCT Designs on Instagram. The content discussed is the property of the Tolkien Estate and of Peter Jackson and New Line Cinemas, and is used here under fair use.